All right. Hey, thanks, Dave, for the introduction. Hi, everyone. We're excited to talk more about identifying sensitive data that may reside in SharePoint, SharePoint Online, and other unstructured data sources that people may have. Today, I'm co-presenting with Rick Rosenberg, who is a partner and is using Informit with one of their government clients. And Rick has a lot of experience in the the enterprise security defense area. Prior to working with Ciros as the CEO, he was at Unisys, which obviously is a large United States defense contractor in different areas. So Rick, I thought maybe we could start off with just talking a little bit about the specific use case and a little bit about what the problem was and how you guys went about solving that problem.
Okay, sure, Peter. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Rick Rosenberg, and the use case we have here was a National Guard organization who has the duty to protect its PII information from being disclosed. They released an RFP for an internal use where the National Guard required a software product to protect its authenticated users that don't have special privileges from gaining access to PII information. In order to do that, we needed to test two environments or scan two environments, which was the test environment and a production environment. And so to answer the RFP, we teamed up with MetaViz for the Informit for SharePoint tool and combined the Ciros installation, training, and rule development services for a winning solution, of which the National Guard chose. We did the implementation very quickly, set them up very quickly, and had them up and running in about 2.5 weeks at the onset. So to date, they're very happy with the implementation and the ease and use of the Informit for SharePoint product. So Peter?
Yeah, so it was a particularly interesting case because, again, it was sensitive data. They didn't really have access to the servers, so needed a way to scan and crawl that information to make sure that the people who had access to that data did have access, but the people who did not were restricted. So that's a common issue with pretty much everybody who has a lot of unstructured content. Just ensuring that people have the proper access to it. Dave, I know obviously you're very knowledgeable in the education space. Can you talk a little bit about the education issues with first identifiable information?
Absolutely. I mean, in education, it's absolutely vital that what you do is you get it right, and you have to make sure that the maintenance of personal information is secure, because it is very sensitive. I mean, we're dealing with children. Because I've done projects ranging from 5-year-olds up to 20-odd-year-old students at university, but all their information is very sensitive and it has to be treated that way. And one of the most difficult ones we ever did was engaging with parents at school levels. Oh, someone asked me to speak slowly. I'll try that. But it's absolutely vital that you get it absolutely right. So parental logons, for instance, had to be absolutely spot on, because you could imagine what would happen if you got it wrong and, a parent logged on and saw someone else's information about their child, and it just wouldn't go down very well at all. So in education, it's absolutely vital that what you do is you maintain and safeguard that information.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, this is a theme with many different types of organizations that have this idea, information that's being stored and archived, and with things like fast search and more powerful search engines, people can find stuff inadvertently. So it's really important that you put some governance around this data, kind of know what you have and who has access to it. So. Today we're going to talk a little bit about that particular issue just in more depth. We're going to show a demonstration of the MetaViz Informit product for SharePoint, which is, again, a data governance tool to kind of give people better perception into what they have. We're also going to talk about traditional enterprise security software, which sometimes doesn't have any visibility into specific applications like SharePoint, and certainly many of the traditional vendors don't have access to information that's stored in the cloud because of their architecture. We're also going to talk a little bit about, what do you do when you find information. Sometimes it's okay for software to, for people to have access. You don't want them to stop their job, but you want to make sure that everyone doesn't have access to it, and the people who should are crawled and analyzed and remediated if there's an issue. So we'll kind of get into that a little bit more. We're going to, again, Informit, the concept, the tagline that we've come up with is this, know your data. IT does not know what users is are putting into things like SharePoint. Their job is to provide infrastructure, their job is to provide security so it can't get hacked into and whatever, but they can't look and see if people are inadvertently loading credit applications with social security numbers, or people who might have sensitive data such as their medical information, anything that could be construed as a bad thing necessarily to have access to for certain types of people. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we can look into the text of documents, the metadata, how to comply with various different government regulations, and there's many of these across different European avenues, and obviously in the United States. People have different alphabet letters for various compliance initiatives. We'll also talk a little bit about how you can use some of your taxonomies and your vocabularies to find information that may be sensitive as well. And then if we have time, we'll talk a little bit about SharePoint is just one data point. But the amount of unstructured data that's growing, not just in SharePoint, but other systems, such as your file system, your drive storage like Google Drive and SkyDrive Pro, which is new, and Dropbox and things like that. It's starting to become a little bit uncontrollable. So again, the thing that people really need to know is what do you have? Who can see it, and can I apply my governance policies to my content? If you can do any improvement of tagging or classification or a restriction of specific permissions to content, it just saves a lot of aggravation in the future in case there's a breach or people inadvertently see other folks' information as a result of more powerful search engines and kind of out-of-control security and permissions policies. I also want to talk a little bit about data at rest versus data in motion. Large organizations typically have security devices out there that block things. So they're called DLP systems, so they're data leakage or data loss prevention. And what they typically do is they try to block things when people try to send stuff. So if you send a sensitive data like an account number, a routing number, your email, it may block that information. But a lot of times that's too late, because there's other mechanisms that people can use to transmit information, such as instant messaging or Skype or Dropbox. That it's really hard for those things to block, because there's just so many alternative channels for people to share information. So the key is to lock down the data at rest. You want to look for data and make sure that sensitive data is only accessed by people who have permission. Rather than trying to block it, you kind of want to remove access to it, which identifies violations before they become a problem. So with that, I want to kind of hand it over to Chris to show a little bit about the product and how we do that. And then also, if you guys have any questions or things, just please put them in the chat window so you can ask the question, and then Dave will moderate the discussion after we conclude. So Chris, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Okay. Okay, so you all should be seeing my screen about now. So thank you, Peter. Just a quick introduction. My name is Chris Koljewski. I work with the product team here at MetaViz. And what we're going to give you a quick demonstration about this morning or this afternoon is the Informit product for SharePoint. So I have a couple of things pre-set up. One that I'll walk through really quickly now just to give you some results, and then we'll take a step back and show you how easy it is to build rules, create policy groups, execute them, and have results within minutes. Okay, so just to start off today, we are going to be talking about Informit. Informit is part of the MetaViz client-side platform. Okay, the other products you see across the top do other things within SharePoint, migration, security, backup, architecture, etc. We'll have other webinars about those products in the near future, but today we're going to talk about Informit. But the main idea is that the MetaViz platform is, as Peter mentioned, it is a client-side tool. So you would install this to some machine within your infrastructure that you want to use the tool from. Okay, so it could be a virtual machine. You could have a Hyper-V or a VM image somewhere. It could be an old machine that sits in the corner of your IT department. Any type of machine you can, a couple gigs of RAM, toss it on there, and you can install the tool. Okay. It is agent-less as well, so you never have to deploy anything to your SharePoint servers. So a lot of people are hesitant for good reasons about installing third-party tools or third-party controls directly to their SharePoint servers. Informit and everything that we'll talk about and demonstrate today does not require anything to be changed, installed, or configured within SharePoint. It is fully security trimmed as well, so this will allow you to do several nice things. So you can, of course, run it as an administrator, and you'll have access to everything, so you can do a nice overall scan, which is what I'll do today. Or you could run it as a typical user, someone who's just in the members group or just has read rights or design level permission to SharePoint. So you can kind of gauge the difference between what you can discover using an administrator account, which may be acceptable for some circumstances, and you can also run it using an account that has read-only access or design access, so you can see what a typical end user would see as far as identifying this information. Okay, so installation, just really quick, it's very straightforward. It's like installing any other application in Windows. Click Next a few times, and the tool will install itself. So there is no heavy installation. There's no 100-page user guide to install it. It literally is just download an executable, run it, wait about 2 minutes, and the tool will be installed. Okay, so the first thing that you would want to do is to create some rules. The first, like I said earlier, the first thing I want to do is just run through the rules. So I've pre-configured a rule and a policy group here that is designed to do a couple of things that you see over here on the right side of the interface. Okay, so what you have here, just before I run it, I'll give you a quick tour of the interface. The Navigator in the pane on the left is where you can connect the tool to SharePoint. So if you want to pre-connect to a specific location within SharePoint, you certainly can. This will give you visual access to the whole structure. So if I want to look in a particular site or an entire site collection, you can go through here and identify those locations visually. In the bottom is your rules. This is the rules that you'll pre-configure or you'll create, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. Rules can be combined into policy groups, which you see up here on the top. This is what you actually end up running against your content. So this is what you'll actually execute, and it will provide you with the results. Groups can contain multiple rules. We'll talk about that more later. And on the right side is just a summary to show you exactly what you've selected on. So what I have here, this identifying information policy group, contains the rule, and this is the information that is going to be run against SharePoint. Okay, so let me run this now. What it's going to do, it's going to look through a SharePoint environment. It's going to look for two things, credit card numbers and or social security numbers. And it's going to identify anything that contains any document, any item, any calendar event, anything in SharePoint that contains either a credit card number or a social security number. And then it's going to do a couple of things based off of our actions below. Okay, so just to slide across here, this is my SharePoint environment. This is Office 365, so I obviously don't have anything installed or configured on the server there. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to scan this whole site. This orders library contains fictional order forms from a customer. Some of them contain some of them contain credit card numbers, others don't, and we'll have some results based off of that content. Okay, so let me just run the rule. We'll talk about more about this in a moment, but for now I'm just going to paste in my URL, identify where I want to run this policy group against, connect. This is where it'll ask you, if I hadn't already entered my account, this is where it'll ask you which user ID do you want to use. So if I put in my admin account, which I am running today, it'll go through and it'll scan everything for you. If I were to put in one of those accounts that has limited access to SharePoint, then of course the rule will be run using that account, so my results might be different between an admin and a non-admin scan. Okay. But I'm using my admin account. It's going to go through, it's going to scan now. You'll see the process is very quick, many files and items a second, and it'll go through and look for all of the content that has any of these rules configured, if it contains a credit card number or if it contains a social security number. And when it's complete, the tool will give you a log file here, which will show you what happened, which rules were triggered, which files or items caused the rule to be triggered. It also gives you a drop down here if you just want a quick summary to show you what exactly happened. Okay. One of the first actions we had was to create a report. So the report was saved out locally to this file, PII results. So you can also open that up, and this will show you exactly the items that triggered it. So it'll show you the site that the items were in. It'll show you the list. It'll show you the name of the file. It'll also show you the path of the file. So if it's nested in a couple of folders, it'll show you the full path to that file so you know exactly where it's located. It'll show you the reason why it was triggered. It was this policy group and it was this particular rule inside of that policy group. And it'll also show you the condition that caused it to be triggered. In this case, each of those documents contained a single credit card number. Okay, so that's one thing you have there is a nice output. This output can be repurposed, which we'll talk about in a few more minutes. So it has more potential, more results, or more actions than just being a report. Okay, the other one was that we were going to set a SharePoint field from credit card number. We see here. So anything, by default, everything was no. Anything that has the credit card number, I'll just refresh it, should change to yes. So out of the 8 documents that were here, we had 2 that triggered it, and both of those were flagged with yes. So since we set the flag in SharePoint, you know, as many of you probably know, now that you've set a flag, this could trigger a workflow, this could trigger a user alert, this could trigger some event receiver or any kind of other activity in SharePoint that you could base off of a field being modified. So we'll just take a look here at Carol's order form that does contain a social security number. I'm sorry, a credit card number. Apologize. We'll just open that up, and you'll see that it did indeed contain a credit card number there, so it was flagged. Some of the other ones, Michael's for example, was not flagged, so we'll take a look at that one, and this one should be obscured. Okay, so it did not trigger that one, so you can tell it is more than just about looking for X amount of characters in a sequence. It actually goes out and looks for patterns, recognizes patterns specific to this example credit card numbers. It could be social security numbers. It does have nice pattern recognition built in to help minimize any of those type of false positives. Okay. The other option that we configured here, the other action, was to secure it. So it's important to identify it, but it might also be important to lock it down. So if it has this information, let me immediately lock it down so that I can get it out of the general use population, and then I can decide at another time how I want to address it. Maybe I want to move it somewhere else. Maybe I need to email the file owner or the site owner and let them know that they have this amount of content that they need to deal with on a one-off basis. But for the time being, you can go in and see that this indeed was locked down in SharePoint Response. So it was given unique permissions. This is this particular document, and I currently am the only one who has access to it. Okay, so you can have an action that'll also lock it down in place. So until you can figure out what you want to do with it, let me just secure it. Okay, and we'll take a look at Michael's. Michael's, which did not contain the number, will still have its normal permissioning inherited from its parent. Okay, so a couple of things we did there. We did a quick scan looking for credit card numbers and social security numbers. Out of the 10 in this site, these 2 were triggered. We flipped the flag to yes, which could trigger a workflow or an event receiver, whatever you have in SharePoint. And we also decided to lock it down in place so that we can decide at a later time how we want to address that appropriately.
Just real quick, Chris, I know we're doing questions at the end, but we've got one really relevant one. How do you define the credit card number?
We have, I'll show you that in a few minutes. We have built-in rules that already has all that pre-configured. So for each of the different credit cards, the sequencing, those type of things are already predefined within the tool. And we have other ways that you can write your own, which I'll talk about again in a few minutes. Okay, so that's the first one. Let's now take a step back. Let me close that down. And let's talk about how you could go through and create your own rule. So the rules can be configured to do any number of different things. We have the pre-canned ones, the credit cards, social securities, IPs, URLs. All of those things are already built into the product. So if that's what you're looking to do, then it's going to help you save a lot of time. So you don't have to worry about how do I detect a Visa card or American Express. All that is already built in for you. So creating rules, very simple to create. First, you want to click the Create Rule button. Give it a name, whatever you want to call it, of course. And then up here in the top left is your built-in conditions. So these are the ones that we've already pre-built into the tool, and we do update this periodically, so we're adding new rules, and we push them out to all of our existing customer base. So this isn't a static list, it is dynamic. The first ones are simply about file conditions. File conditions, a lot of times people want to scan file shares for certain information. So you could scan for length, extensions, maybe I only want to find PDFs that contain this information. You have a nice condition there that you can include extensions. Document name, this isn't looking into the document, it's just looking at the name. So the name of the document contains PII or anything. It could say payroll, a company payroll. That would be something that you probably would identify and you probably want to secure. So you could do that type of thing against the name of documents. Lengths, values, this would be metadata associated to it. Document content contains, that's the one that was similar to what we just ran. This is where it's actually going to go, and it's going to look inside of the content, in the Word docs, your PDFs, your spreadsheets, text files. It's going to go through and it's going to look at each file, scan the body of it, and look for the occurrence that you ask it to. And this occurrences that you could do could be custom values. So if you wanted to search for the word payroll or salary, you could type it in here as few or as many as you want. Case sensitive, match entire word if you're going to be very specific. Like Peter mentioned in his opening slides, we also can tap in your taxonomy. So if you have a term set configured that has client names or project IDs, case, if you're a law firm or something, you have legal terms or legal matter IDs in your term store in SharePoint already, you can have the tool pull in those values for you and scan for any documents that contain that information. So if you already have values, you can repurpose them. Of course, you can also do the same thing with lookup lists. If you have something you don't have a term store, you're still using lookups in 2007, you can certainly tap into that as well. Okay, so the idea here is this is where you can define if you're looking for a specific value or groups of values. You can certainly enter those here. Okay, you'll also have other conditions for permissioning if you want to scan through for permissions, where they're broken, where they're inherited. PII, this is the one that we just ran. So these are your pre-built rules that come with the tool. First one being credit card. So this is the one that we did use over here. So this will scan through, and like I said, it's already pre-configured to look for the different types of credit cards, different sequences, the different makeup of those unique credit card numbers. Social Security numbers here in the States will allow you to do just that. So rather than looking for a specific Social Security number, which you would do if you were searching through SharePoint, for example, we look for the sequence of Social Security numbers. So we try to minimize any of those other types of numbers or groups of numbers that would come up to 9 characters in length. IP addresses could be important as well if you're in a secured area, government, military situations where you might have IP addresses in your documentation that should not be exposed to anybody that can log into a team site, go to the shared documents library, and see a list of all of those confidential or those secure IP addresses for your different servers. Okay, and then you also have one that's just simply looking for URLs in the body of your documents. So a lot of people who are doing migrations want to know what happens if I have a URL that points to my original legacy SharePoint. This could go through and do a quick scan for you, identify each document. Maybe you don't have any documents, or maybe you just have a handful of documents that need to go through and be updated. Okay. Site conditions, more specific to SharePoint. And then the last one is the regular expression. So this could become the catch-all. So if we have security folks on the call with us today, you're probably very intimately familiar with regular expression. So we do have, I think Peter wants to chime in here.
So people who come from enterprise security, and Rick, please feel free to weigh in here. They already have regular expressions in place with their security information management systems or the DLP systems. So a lot of times they can just cut and paste those regular expressions that are particular to their corporate security policies. People have specific, account IDs or patient ID records where, it starts with a Z. For example, UPS, everything always starts with a Z, and then it has a certain, code afterwards. So people can configure these relatively easy, and Chris can kind of show you what one looks like a little bit later. But and there's many regular expressions available on the web where people have created things to look for specific addresses or telephone numbers in various different countries and things like that. So it's very, very flexible and powerful for people who want to either do a broad search or narrow the information down to a very, very small range of possible results.
Okay. So yeah, with that, what Peter just explained, we do support that both for 2 different actions here. You have it both for document name, so if you want to search just for the names of your documents, and or document content. So this will actually go through and search in the content for your regular expression. And I'll show you one of those that I pre-built as well, just to give you an idea of how that works. Okay. As you can see here, you can have multiple conditions, so it doesn't have to be just look for this and then do that. Like I did over here, it was look for A or B and then give me a condition, an action, a report, permissions, what have you. So you can combine multiple conditions into a single rule, or you can combine multiple rules into a single policy group. But here you have multiple conditions in a single rule, and you do have a formula that allows you to be more specific. So if it contains this and this, if it contains this or this, maybe it does not contain this. I want a report that shows me everything that does not contain this value, which is what my next example will be. And then the second piece of the equation is the actions. If you trigger this condition, what do you want to happen? So the first one is the report, which we just took a look at earlier. This will give you a spreadsheet that shows you every action, every item in SharePoint or your file share that has triggered that condition. Okay, so you'll have that report, which you can review, you can email to someone, or you can load it back into the product, which we'll talk about again in a few minutes. You can also delete the object. Maybe you just want to remove it altogether. I don't want to secure it. I don't want to tag it. I just want to get it out of that shared documents library. So that will do just that. Okay, the next one is a set the field in SharePoint. This is what we saw with the credit card number. Go to this field and apply this word or this term, or flip it to yes or no. That which could then trigger your workflow or your event receiver to do something else. You could also copy it. So yes, it exists. Let me copy it somewhere else. Let me move it from this open, non-secured shared documents library to another site that has a secure documents library, and then I'll decide what I want to do with it once it's out of that unsecured location. This one was the grant permissions. This is where you can lock it down. So you'll change the permissions on that item in its location, and you'll set it to a specific user or group and give them access to it so that you can just secure it in place and then deal with it when you're ready to deal with it, or once you decide how to deal with it, you can go back and deal with it. Okay, and then the last one is versioning. This will just allow you to change versioning. Set it to major, major, minor, or no versioning if you need to. Okay, and like the conditions, you can also apply, like we've done over here, you can also apply multiple actions to each. So if it triggers it, do A, do B, do C. So you can have multiples of those as well. Okay. So prior to the call again, I just set up another quick example here. What I did was I did document contains. So I went to my regular expression, I applied my document contains, and I put in a very simple regular expression here. This is designed to go out and find CPT codes in documents. Okay, so anything that has the CPT code in it, let's do something with it. Okay, but rather than doing it in that approach, I expect every document to contain this CPT code. What I want to do is scan for documents that do not contain the CPT code, because then I need to go back and I need to add one, or I need to let the person who created the file know that they forgot to add a CPT code to this document. So what I will do is I'll create the document contains rule with my regular expression, and I'll put in my custom formula that says not A. So anything that does not contain that. Go ahead, Peter.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to say a CPT code is a medical terminology, right? So in medical documents, in order to bill or have a procedure, you have to put these codes. I'm not sure if it's the same in other countries. In the United States, there's a whole taxonomy of, have a glucose test or, a cholesterol test, and everything has a code associated with it so it can be billed. Maybe that's not as important in other countries, but it's really important here. Similar things could be client matter numbers with law firms. For example, if a document doesn't have a client matter number, then probably that law firm didn't bill for that, or which they're always apt to want to do more of, or it's lost. Some documents get lost because they don't have a proper tag. So Chris, I'll let you get back to that.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm sorry, I did skip over the explanation, but the basic idea is that rather than scanning for something, we're scanning for something that does not contain it. So everything should. Let's find out if there is any that do not, and if they do not, then we'll take action. And this particular action here is just going to give us a report. So I just want a report out of all the documents. In this example, will be a file share that does not contain this particular code in its body. Okay, so that's just a pretty simple rule here. The policy groups up at the top, this is where you can group together your rules. So you could have, like we have here, multiple combinations of conditions with actions, or if you want to make it a little bit more structured, you could have a rule that looks for credit card numbers and then does this. You could have another rule that looks for Social Security numbers and does this, and you can combine those all into a single policy group. So you could have a PII policy group that has 4, 5, 6, 10 different rules inside of it that'll look for and do different things, and they'll all be executed in parallel, so it'll give you that nice throughput and that nice performance as well. Okay. So let me walk through the process here. I kind of glossed over it earlier. Within the menu, of course, you can add your rules. So once you create your policy groups, what rules do you want to include with it? Delete, create policy group, import, export. It could be important as well if you have multiple people doing this and you want to share rules or share policy groups. This is a simple export from mine, email it to you, you import it to yours. Okay, so a good way to share some or collaborate on different rules. But what you want to do ultimately is use the policy group. It's going to ask you to select the resource. This is what you want to run it against. We do support file shares. We do support SharePoint, and we will support Exchange in the near future as well. And we also do support the CSV. So what we've mentioned a few times is once you generate that CSV report, you can also load it back into the tool and you can rescan it using a different rule. So maybe you want to be a little bit more flexible for the first go around, maybe pick up some false positives, then go back and be very detailed. So run a more strict rule against the results of your spreadsheet. And you can then really narrow down or filter out some of those extra hits that you might not need from the initial scan. Okay, so you have the file share here, which will go against local shares, map shares, anything like that within your Windows profile. You also have SharePoint Sites, which we talked about earlier. This will actually go against a site or a collection if you need to. The Connect will ask you to log in, and you can also include subsites if you want to do the entire collection. So maybe I need to go top to bottom. I need to scan everything within that site collection. You can certainly do it. Or you could go against multiple site collections. So if I want to go against 1, 2, 3, 10, or 100 different SharePoint site collections, I can load them all in here, and the tool will process them all identically and give you some reports. Okay. But for now, let me just go against my file share. I have a pre-configured. Let me just slide it over here. I have a pre-configured folder here, very simple. Patient records. Some of them contain CPTs. I don't remember which ones. Some of them do not. It's just 25 or 26 here. PDFs, a mix of PDFs, Word docs, just sitting here on my local C drive. So I'll go into my patient records. When you click, well, let me go back. You have scripting. Scripting is important as well. Again, people on the call are probably familiar with PowerShell, possibly command line. We do fully support those as well. So this will allow you to not have to come through in the tool, go through the UI, click Next, and execute it. This will allow you to do very simple command line scripts as well, giving you the same flexibility, the same power of the scan. It's just a different way to automate the process. Put it into Task Scheduler, put it into some other third-party scheduling program, and then do it once a day or once a week, once a month. You'll have some kind of frequency to your scans. Okay. And then expanding on that, let me just check my patient records. We do support incrementals as well, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you run the scan. If you scan, you do your initial scan, you can then, with a little more frequency, do an incremental. Maybe do an incremental once a day or once a week, and rather than scanning again documents that you've already done because they haven't been modified, they haven't been added in the past day or past week, incremental will only look for that new content or that recently modified content. So your scans will become smaller since the subset of content that's been modified or created since the last one is smaller than your initial load, which could be gigs or terabytes of content. So we do support incrementals, which gives you that more frequency action. But now it's going to go finish. You'll see very quick. It just scanned through all 25 or so files in about a second. You'll have the same log output, which will show you the files that were triggered. And if you expand it, it'll also show you the rules, what triggered that option. Okay. And then we'll just slide back our results. So my result here was just to put it to a CSV file, which is this one. We open it up. And now this one is going to show us the same thing we just saw in the log. Each of the files, there were 5 files. This was the file name. This was the reason. It was in this policy group. It was this rule. And this is the condition. The condition is that it did not contain that CPT code as defined by a regular expression. Okay, so we'll take a look at just the first one here. Mark. This file, according to the rule, does not contain a CPT, so we open that up. We should see that the field here is empty. It is true, it did not contain a CPT number. So someone would have to go back in and modify that document. Okay, another one would be, say, George here. George Finch. It should be the same thing. CPT field is empty. And then just for consistency, we'll take a look at this first one, which was not included on our list, which means it should contain a number. So we open that one up. you should see here that it does indeed contain a number. And this regular expression was identifying a 5-digit character with the sequencing that is appropriate for these procedures, these medical procedures. Okay, so it wasn't just a 5-digit number, but it was a very specific sequence of 5-digit numbers. It's also 4 digits that end in a character as well. Okay, so that's as simple as it can be. They have 5-minute install, no server-side controls, completely client-based, so it does work with on-premise or cloud-based solutions. It has many predefined rules built in that you can get up and scanning within minutes. Or if you want to do something a little bit more sophisticated, you have the regular expression and you have other pre-built-in conditions and actions that will help you identify your content.
All right, thanks a lot, Chris. If you can switch me back to presenter, I'll kind of wrap things up and then we'll get to the questions.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. So just to kind of reiterate what Chris said, discover, report, identify sensitive information, tag it, and then take some action. I mean, there's a lot of things that you could potentially do to match files, but taking action on those files at the same time is really important to remediate that information in a timely manner, and make sure that people who create that content information are following the proper procedures and such. The other thing that's really critical is working, for example, with Cirrus. They understand their clients' needs, and they can create those rules and policies based upon the client's requirements. Because while we have a base rule set and flexibility to design, we really look to people who have domain knowledge in that particular industry vertical to create those rules that are particular to a client. So. Appreciate Rick, helping out with that, and we'll answer some questions about that a little bit more. So just again to finalize, trying to mitigate the risk, try to improve security, and provide some governance around content. Rick, anything to add there, or do you want to head to questions?
No, you've covered it very well. Just head to questions.
Okay. Dave, is there any questions or?
Yeah, there's a ton of them.
Okay.
Some have already been answered by Chris, but we'll recap over those. The first one, is this being recorded, and will the slides be available later? It is being recorded. I don't know about the slides. Peter?
Yeah, of course, we'll make them available.
Okay. We have the Architect Suite. Does it include Informit?
It does not. It's a module that can be added on. So MetaViz, as some of you know, is a platform, and then depending upon how what licenses you purchase or configure or negotiate with your salesperson, certain things appear in your thing. But it is part of the MetaViz platform, and it can be added to any MetaViz license that you may have. If you have any questions, just reach out to your salesperson.
Absolutely. Is this application standalone, or should it be installed on SharePoint Server? If it is standalone application, then what kind of configuration required? You're going to love the answer to this. Required to SharePoint Server. In my case, Microsoft Online Hosted SharePoint Service.
Right. So you install this application on anything in your environment, and it accesses SharePoint Online remotely. So just like you would with a browser, you have nothing to install or configure in your SharePoint environment. It's automatically security trimmed. For enterprise clients, we recommend that you install this on a server class machine that has minimum of 8 gigs of RAM, because it is multi-threaded. It can scale pretty horizontally and vertically, depending upon how much memory and CPU you give it. It'll go faster, you can take advantage of that with the scanning capability. So what we recommend is you can certainly try it and put it on your workstation, but obviously if you close your laptop and go home, then the scan stops. So you want to put this into something that's a little more reliable if you're going to be scheduling these and running these at various times.
Okay.
For example, with the Guard project that we did, we installed it on a Windows 2008 virtual machine, It had network to both SharePoint environments, network connectivity to both SharePoint environments, and worked just fine.
Okay, great.
Good, good, thank you. Can we run the scan at web app level, web application level, rather than site collection level?
Chris, do you want to talk about the connecting to the farm?
Yeah. We have the ability to tap into multiple collections, so you can identify individual collections or groups of collections that you want to within your web apps. So it gives you more flexibility about just saying all collections within an app. It could be collections scattered throughout different web apps, or collections scattered throughout your online tenancy as well.
Good answer.
Right. So I just want to confirm, so with Office 365, the 2013 version of Office 365, you can connect at the tenant level and see multiple site collections without having to connect to each one of them. Is that correct, Chris?
Correct. Yeah, we do.
Okay.
We do support tenant administration in online.
Good. Okay. This is in response to the demo you're giving in the reports, Chris, the CSV reports. Is this report appended every time a same policy scan is run on or a new file created?
This file is rewritten. So if you want to put it somewhere else, maybe you want to drop it into a SharePoint library, that could certainly be supported. If you export it to a file share, then it will be overwritten next time it's run.
Okay.
And also, just from a security perspective, you don't want to create another issue of PII. So some clients have this written to a encrypted drive, or an area that's secure and has limited access. And we're also going to be adding some features where this actual report gets encrypted as well for people who have super sensitive issues. So I just want to point that out. We're not trying to create another source of problems down the road.
It's a very good point, actually. Yes.
Right. It's a self-sustaining issue.
Yeah, that's right. On to the next. Is the set SharePoint field value visible within a SharePoint item form, like when you click on properties of the document? Can anyone change that value as long as it has permission?
Yes, that is a SharePoint column.
Thank you. That's good.
I just created I don't remember if it was just a yes/no column or it was a single line of text. I don't remember how I configured it.
Okay. So we've got two basically the same. Is there a way to schedule these rules to be applied or on a schedule, much like a timer job, or does it always require a user kickoff? And does the tool have an option to schedule the scan? Chris?
Yes, we do support scheduling, so you could do it with frequency. We do have an integration with Windows Task Scheduler, so if you would rather do it through that, we do integrate with it rather nicely. Then you just have to go in there and configure your frequency. How often do you want to run it?
Cool.
You could use any other third-party scheduler, PowerShell, if you want to do some PowerShell commands, so we do support multiple ways to execute. You don't have to log in and manually fire off one of these rules.
Okay. So the next question is, so we use TreeView for duplicate search ect. Looks like MetaViz can do that too, and also AutoTag. Find the ones that have not been tagged?
Yes.
Good.
Yes, it can do that as well. It can AutoTag, which we saw very basic with the yes/no field. It can AutoTag based off the content. You can AutoTag if you, for example, you create a new manage metadata field, post all of uploading or adding all of your content, you can actually go through and AutoTag all of the content with a new term from that manage metadata field. So it works to help continually classify your content as it exists already in SharePoint.
Good. Server, that's a good question. Server class machine, but the licenses are user-based. Well, the answer is?
Actually, MetaViz user, so it's not really user-based. So, typically if you have multiple servers running, you would get, just multiple activations from MetaViz. So it's not tied to the number of users. The pricing, how we've been selling it is mainly the amount of content at rest that it's looking at. So if your SharePoint farm has a terabyte of content, it's one price. If it has 200 gigs of content, it's going to have less. We have, we're always open to exploring other options if it's something that works better for some of the clients. So.
Good. whether this application is able to track SharePoint 2013 apps, services, processes?
App services, I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
Probably not. If Chris can't think of it, probably not.
Off the top of my head, I'm going to say no, but
Right.
Okay. Oh, stumped him. Good. Is this application available in Office 365 SharePoint dedicated environment or just Office 365 SharePoint multi-tenant, Chris?
it'll work with either. Yeah, it'll work with, because it's remote, it doesn't matter if you're dedicated, multi-tenant, on-premise, any other SharePoint hosted provider out there. As long as you can connect to it from your machine, then you'll be able to scan it.
And the final question at the moment, how this tool getting log data of site collection, is this tool interacting SharePoint content database directly or using CSOM code?
Yes, we do not, any of our products, none of our products interact with any underlying database at all. Everything we do is done through SharePoint, APIs, CSOM. We don't ask for your database login. We don't want to know your SQL, your SQL login or your admin password. Everything is done via SharePoint, APIs, and CSOM for 2013.
And the last answer, which I think is more of a statement, cool. So I think that's good. We've run out of questions.
All right, great. So it's perfect timing. Rick, again, I really appreciate you, joining with us and with your client. I'm again appreciative of having you on the call, and Dave, as usual, thank you for moderating and
Absolutely.
again now.
Okay, and just very quickly. Oh, sorry, Rick.
I just said it's been my pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you. And just very quickly, the next webinar is next Wednesday with Christina Wheeler. So sign up for that. It's the usual place. And we'll see you all then. So thank you very much. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Chris.
Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.